I own an unhealthy amount of film cameras, but lately I have come to love one in particular, and in today's video, I want to explain why. This is the Canon EOS 7. Otherwise known as the Elan 7 or the EOS 30 or EOS 33. These can be bought for around $200, and I think they are not only the best bang for buck film camera, but maybe the best film camera overall. In today's video, I'm going to break down some reasons that I rate the EOS 7 so highly. I'm going to show you some examples from recent shoots I did. I'll also cover the cons, and then I will share with you some alternatives to this. So let's start with the pros. Autofocus was a focus of this model. This camera has some advanced and quirky eye control features that do work, but not well enough to not just use the usual center point focus and recompose. What all this means though is that Canon clearly put a lot of time and energy into the focusing system in this camera, and that really shows. Pretty much all of the other autofocus SLRs that I have used tend to hunt around a lot when you're using autofocus, and it can be really frustrating. It won't lock on to those contrasty points. But with the EOS 7, it is so quick. It's like and it's just focused. It's so pleasing. This camera handles like something you could buy and use today. Everything feels extremely tight and clicky. A few functions are a little bit annoying to access. We've lost a bit of real estate on the top panel for these focus mode dials, which I would have preferred to have been used for something else, but as I said, they were a key function of this model and something that makes it cool and unique. The EOS 7 has a built-in flash, otherwise known as BIF, which has become very important to me because I've built a portfolio around the direct flash look that's really come back into style over the last few years. Obviously, there is a hot shoot as well, so you could mount a speed light or you could do some kind of off-camera flash as well if you wanted to. I think being able to use flash in whatever way you want is extremely critical, especially when you're using film, because if you don't have a lot of light, then flash is just such a good option to have, and it's something that I lean on a lot style-wise, but also to combat any kind of situation I'm in. Something I don't hear people talk about enough is how handy these mode dials are. I've developed a bit of a system with this camera and the mode dial, and I think it allows me to stay immersed in whatever's going on in the situation that I'm shooting, and that's something that's really important to me, to be able to respond to the moment and grab the shot without thinking too much about the settings. So I'm normally shooting with the flash on, and for this I'll pop it in P mode and then just have the flash up. If I am shooting in lower light or I don't want the flash to go off, I will pop it in TV mode and normally have it on 60 or 125. I do that because I don't want the shutter speed to drop too low and then get a blurry image. So this simple way of thinking about it has become a go-to when I'm on sets, and normally I have quite a few people talking to me. There's all this food coming out. The shoot turns into something that it wasn't initially supposed to be, which kind of always happens. I don't really have to think too much. I can use these. And the other good thing about the mode dial is simply being able to pop it on portrait mode, for example. If you are taking a portrait or you want to focus on one specific thing and have the background bokeh out, you know that that setting is going to kind of do that for you. And then we have landscape as well, which is going to allow everything to be in focus. So these modes are just a really easy way to set your camera to whatever it is that you are wanting to get in your final result without having to mess around too much with too many settings. People who tend to shoot all manually kind of shy away from mode dials, but I think it's a really good time-saving hack. So that feature is one of the reasons that I really like the EOS 7, but of course you could always pop it into manual mode too and shoot like that if you want to. So it truly does have it all. So the EOS 7 runs the line between a consumer grade camera that your mum might have owned and a more professional grade one. Pros could easily use one of these and probably carry them as a second option. But where you can really feel that jump up to the semi-professional level is in the viewfinder. As somebody who's used these generation SLRs a lot, I can definitely tell you that there is a significant difference in the viewfinder in the EOS 7 when comparing it with something like the Rebel G that I've used a lot, or like the F60, F65. And when comparing this to a vintage SLR like the FA, it's obviously going to be a lot brighter, a lot clearer, and just so much easier to see through. Being an SLR, this will obviously depend on what lens you are using as well, but I think being able to see clearly like that, honestly, is just such a game changer. When I got this camera and looked through, I was amazed at how much clearer I could see, and I felt so much more confident clicking the shutter, taking the photo than on something like the Rebel G. So right now I have my 40mm pancake lens on this camera, which I love because I love the 40mm focal length. It's natural to how the eye sees. And in my work, like this work I did for the restaurant, they want it to look very natural, very, candid, like you're there at the restaurant experiencing all of these things. So I find 40mm to be so great for that. I also love the fact that it makes this a fairly compact setup. Whenever there is plenty of light, I will always opt for the 40mm lens, but I will go for this 50mm 1.8 if the light is a little bit lower, and it does make a huge difference. Obviously, we all know that lens matters a lot more than body, and another reason that I love the EOS 7 is because you can pop all of the Canon full frame lenses on this camera right up to like the Pro L series. So it really is so versatile and can turn it into, as simple or as professional as you want. I recently did a shoot with an artist in the city, and I was so happy to have both the 40 and the 50mm to just switch over when I needed. Photographing artists is so much fun, and Alessia was no exception. We did have to travel to the city for this shoot, so I planned everything out with Alessia in advance using a Milanote board, and this was really great to dial in the vibe remotely and have everything organized before the video and photo shoot. Milanote is an easy to use and very intuitive tool to organize your creative projects into visual boards. I find this so handy as a way to gather inspiration for a photo shoot and to convey what's in my head to the person I'm collaborating with. Usually I have to create a mood board with visuals and then do something separate for the other components like shot lists, outlining deliverables, and understanding the finer details. And this can get really messy and overwhelming. Milanote helps me to bring all of these ideas together in one place by creating boards that can be populated with various assets. Things like links to videos using the Milanote web clipper, images, checklists to stay on track, PDFs, and even fun things like drawing straight onto the board for a more organic feel. I can then drag and drop everything with Milanote's flexible interface and organize my references in a way that conveys my idea clearly, which is very important for photographers to do ahead of a shoot. When you're ready to share your work, it's super easy to invite collaborators via a link or email. Anyone with a free Milanote account can view the board and provide feedback. They can even make edits too, so it's a tool that integrates so well in any creative team. Milanote makes starting a new project easy, with over 100 built-in templates available for every type of creative project. For example, I used the photo shoot plan template for this project, and it really helped to make my vision concise, and my client was so impressed at the way it was all presented. There are plenty of template options for designers, content creators, filmmakers, and anyone who needs to bring references together and get clear on the creative direction. If you want to try it for yourself, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description. Thanks to Milanote for sponsoring today's video. Build quality is really important if you're going to be using a camera a lot, and I would say overall, Canon EOS 7 generally is pretty decent build quality wise. There are a few little things that aren't so great that I'm going to be covering in the next section though. There's a couple of weak spots on the Canon EOS 7 and a lot of these more plasticky kind of built cameras. So film door, I always just make sure I'm really super careful when I'm opening and closing it. And then battery door as well is another weak spot. Another con is the batteries themselves that the Canon EOS 7 takes are extremely expensive. These CR123 batteries are about $45 for a 2-pack in Australia, which that's a lot for batteries. You can get rechargeable ones, but I'm always sus on them. So I just make sure that I always have a backup, and I make sure I put fresh ones in there if I can for a shoot, especially if the stakes are really high. In saying that, they do seem to last for quite a while, but I use the flash pretty much all the time when I'm using this camera, so maybe I'm burning through them a little bit quicker. I would say the price of these batteries is probably one of the biggest cons of this camera, but I'm willing to wear it. Another con about the EOS 7 is no one will think that you're cool wearing it or using it. A lot of clients I've had just think that it's a digital camera, or they don't say anything like if you showed up with a really cool, film point and shoot or like an older style SLR. But that kind of doesn't bother me anymore now that I'm a bit older and just want the result. The other con, it's not necessarily a con for me, but I know that it will be for a lot of people, is when you're using this generation of camera, you are just, pushing buttons. It's a lot more close to shooting a digital camera. Whereas if you are using something like the beautiful Nikon FA here, it's a lot more romantic and you're getting to engage with things like the advanced lever and just generally have that film experience. So if that's really important to you, I would imagine using something like this might feel a little bit soulless, but it doesn't bother me. I like using both, and for the kind of result that I want to get, this does the job a lot better than the limitations I would face using something like this. Another con compared to something like the Rebel G is that the EOS 7 is a little bit heavier. It's not necessarily something I would maybe put on and walk around just to take photos on the weekend while I'm out and about. I would take the Rebel G with the 40mm pancake lens, because that really is, I know it's annoying when people say it, but it is kind of like a point and shoot. I don't even notice that the camera is there. So the EOS 7 is slightly heavier, but it's definitely not as heavy as like a big chunk like the FA. It probably is also the lens. These EF lenses are so light. This 40mm pancake weighs absolutely nothing compared to like a vintage lens. So again, with all of these things, obviously it's down to personal preference and what you're actually using the camera for. I am somebody who doesn't get overly romantic, I don't think, about the gear. I'm more interested in the kind of result that I'm getting and what is going to get me there. To further explain why I love and use the EOS 7 so much, I'm going to compare it to a few alternatives here. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I absolutely love my Rebel G and I do recommend it a lot to people. I was using that more so, but I have since changed my tune and I much prefer using the EOS 7 for all of the reasons that I've mentioned, like the viewfinder. If you look through this, so big and so clear and just like so amazing. And then you look through the Rebel G, which I still love. It feels like when you look through a point and shoot viewfinder and you're kind of like, I don't really know exactly what I'm getting and I can't really see properly, and it feels a little bit more like a mystery. So because of that, I have been using the EOS 7 so much more. The autofocus feels more responsive, all of those things. It just feels like a better version of the Rebel G. But if I was out and about shooting in like full sun, I was walking around, it was just for my personal kind of walk around style photography, I would still 100% use the Rebel G. As you can see here, I own a Nikon F100, which I think is an absolute beast. It's such a good camera. And someone actually DM'd me on Instagram when I posted a picture of this on a shoot and asked me why I wasn't using this, which is a totally fair question because it's such an amazing camera. My husband has used it a lot to take photos of me and I've really loved the results that we've got from it. It's very, very, very capable. But for me personally, the two issues I have is there's no built-in flash, which makes using flash just more complicated. And there are no mode dials. So I can't do my little time-saving hack with the mode dials. Another alternative would be something like the Nikon F80, which I own, but it's kind of buried somewhere in my camera stash because the battery door has broken and I can literally shake it and it makes a noise. The build quality isn't that great. It has a built-in flash, but I always seem to put it on a weird setting or just have problems with it, which is why I then moved over to using a Nikon F60 or F65, which very much mirror like the Rebel G. And of course, other brands like Milanote and Pentax, which are really, really great, would definitely be an option if you were looking at something like this, if you had already bought into that lens system, which I haven't. I have a lot of Nikon lenses, and I've also been accumulating some Canon lenses now as well. For me, my work has that kind of point and shoot feel, and it's sort of what I get hired for on a job. So you might be thinking like, why aren't you using a point and shoot? And I do own quite a few, very good point and shoots like the Yashica T4, and I do take them along to jobs with me as like a secondary thing. I did it on this restaurant shoot. I had some black and white in my T4, so I just shot it at the shoot for like a fun kind of like different look. But I was really underwhelmed by all of the photos. A lot of them like weren't in focus, which just seems to always happen with point and shoots. You just don't really know what you're going to get. And they're fun to use, but very unreliable. The only point and shoot camera that I have found that could rival the EOS 7 and I would feel confident with in terms of the photos would be my Nikon L35AF. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you might even be here because you watched one of those earlier cringe Nikon L35AF videos that I did. But that camera is so sharp. The photos look amazing and the flash is so strong. So it looks really similar to something I'd get from using, the EOS 7. Whereas the Yashica T4, I feel like the flash is really weak. So unless you're like closer, it just doesn't really like bang and have that punch to it the same way the Nikon L35AF does. I have to mention though, before you run out or you go and look on eBay and buy a Nikon L35AF, they have so many build quality issues. It's like the bane of my existence. I own like 7 of them and there's only one that is in like okay sort of condition. You have to tape them up. They're a bit of a nightmare. It's such a shame because they are such good point and shoot cameras. I haven't really talked about rangefinders, and it's hard to kind of cover like all the styles of film cameras in one video, but I think, for the right person, for an enthusiast person who is serious and wants to commit to learning, zone focusing and really committing to the rangefinder experience, they're definitely a viable option and could 100% be somebody's favorite film camera. For someone like me, I really don't gel with them and it just wouldn't make sense for the kind of work that I am producing personally and professionally. But I think rangefinders are really cool cameras, and of course there are a dedicated group of people that would really resonate with them, but I think it's less than we actually think it is. I think that, something like this is far more usable for a lot of people. So there you have it. I've made my case as to why I think that the Canon EOS 7 is my favorite and low-key the best film camera that you can get. But please let me know in the comments if I have convinced you, or if you have a camera that you think is better or is your favorite. I would love to know.